Hey all, so today we're going to be looking at brain and sensory function, and this is titled Body Integration in your textbook, which is chapter D3.1. And we're going to be thinking about what are the roles of nerves and hormones in the integration of body systems. And so there's going to be a separate video that focuses more on hormones, and this one's going to focus more on nerves. So we're going to be looking at pages 451 to 462. And we want to be thinking about interaction and interdependence. So for example, how are nerves signaling to our brain, and how is our brain creating action within our bodies? So to get started, organisms have multiple systems and they're all connected together. System integration depends on effective communication between the components with complex loops and branches. So systems are going to develop emergent properties, which means they don't function exactly the same way independently as they would as a whole unit. And so we wouldn't be able to we can measure the emergent properties when they're functioning together, but if we pulled all the pieces apart, we wouldn't see the emergent properties arising. So there are a few different components that we need to be aware of here. We've already learned about cells, and tissues are made of cells. Those cells carry out specific functions, as do those tissues. And they stick together using middle lamella in plants and transmembrane proteins in animals. So those tissues are going to stick together. Middle lamella is like a gluey pectin that holds cell walls together. And organs are a group of tissue that work together to do a job. So for example, a leaf organ or a kidney organ. Leaves have spongy and palisade mesophyll cells, so they have different types of cells that all function together to do their job. And so gas exchange is happening in spongy mesophyll, and palisade mesophyll has photosynthesis happening. In kidneys, they have a variety of cells also that are working to filter out our blood. And then an organ system is going to be organs linked together. And so those organs are typically quite close to each other. They're attached to each other. So a good example would be like the circulatory system or the digestive system. So the digestive system, the stomach is connected to the intestines, and the large and small intestine are connected to each other. The small intestine is connected to the pancreas. So that's an organ system. When we are thinking about signaling throughout our bodies, we are going to be looking at two ways of signaling, both our hormones and our brains. So transmission of signals can be sent via hormones or neurons, not brains, sorry. And hormones are going to travel in the blood. They're going to target cells. They'll travel to all cells, but only certain ones with receptors are going to respond. That's relevant in growth, reproduction, mood, blood glucose, metabolism. The signal is slower, but it lasts longer. Neurons travel to one set of effector cells. Those are the action cells. And it's going to affect muscles or glands, and it's going to send a signal quickly, and it's going to be done once that signal has been sent. The brain is the organ that centrally compiles and interprets information. So it's going to receive info from sensory receptors, like, for example, the eye, but also pressure sensors in blood vessels. We'll talk more about that in the next video. And that's going to allow decision-making or reactions to happen. So our central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, and it has 31 pairs of spinal nerves that branch out from between our vertebrae. Those are the bones in our spine. And the spinal cord has two main tissues. It has white matter, which has myelinated axons that receive signals from sensory receptors and send to the brain, and then from the brain to the organs. Myelin is a type of fatty tissue that allows signals to be sent more quickly via neurons. And we'll talk more about that when we look at neuron structure. And then there's gray matter, and that's going to be the cell body, which has the nucleus in it, and that's the top of the neuron. And so it's the cell body of the motor neurons. The motor neurons are connected to muscles that make us move. And then interneurons are connectors between different neurons. So they're going to send a cell between neurons. And a synapse is the space between neurons. So they send neurotransmitters between the synapse to fire from one neuron to the next. Synapses in gray matter process information to make unconscious decisions. So different neurotransmitters are being released to signal different things unconsciously. And then lastly, the cerebellum coordinates skeletal muscle contraction, but it doesn't make decisions as to which muscles are contracting. That's going to be related to the brain, or alternate, like related. So the cerebellum is here, and it makes decision. Well, it doesn't make decisions. It coordinates skeletal muscle contraction. It's also involved in muscle memory. But the cerebrum is where processing of information is occurring and decision-making is occurring. And the spinal cord is also able to make decisions to coordinate unconscious processes like reflexes or swallowing. This is the spinal cord. The top of it is the brainstem. And that's going to use smooth muscles or glands. There's different types of muscles, smooth, striated, and cardiac. Smooth muscles are related to digestive processes and organs. Cardiac muscle is heart, and then striated muscle is muscles like my bicep. And when we're talking about glands, we can have exocrine glands. Exocrine glands release hormones or substances directly into a tube that's going to connect to an organ. And endocrine glands are going to release hormones into your bloodstream to signal things. So an exocrine gland would be related to your digestive process, squirting, let's say, digestive enzymes into the small intestine from the pancreas, whereas an endocrine gland would be related to the pituitary gland up here, secreting hormones into your bloodstream. So your spinal cord is also coordinating processes when you're asleep. Conscious processes are coordinated by the central brain hemisphere, that's the cerebrum up here, to use striated muscles. And then there are sensory receptors on the skin and other organs, like stretch receptors or chemoreceptors, and they have neurons sending electrical signals to specific parts of the brain with long and short axons. Those are the little tails that you see here, dependent on the distance from that sensory receptor to the brain. In the cerebral hemispheres, the relay neurons receive the signals and then send them out via the cell body to motor neurons. So these here are relay neurons. They are going to send signals between sensory neurons and then motor neurons. So sensory neurons have cell receptors here that are detecting senses, and then motor neurons are attached to muscles or glands. It's just affecting an effector that it's connected to. So a good example of how the brain, the spinal cord can work is something called a reflex arc. So firstly, a nerve is a bundle of nerve fibers, axons, that are all cased together in a protective cover. The length and width differ of nerves. Some may have more or less myelin. Most contain sensory neurons and motor neurons. But what a reflex arc is it's a way of speeding up the signaling system that bypasses conscious control to a muscular reaction. So what ends up happening is here you've put your finger in a flame or on a hot stove, and the signal gets sent to your spinal cord. And at that point, the interneuron is going to send the signal back out to the motor neuron here. And that interneuron is making a decision about appropriate response. Like, do I need to get my hand off of that fire immediately, or is it fine? And so if the immediate response needs to happen, then it's going to send a signal immediately to the motor neuron to move the hand away. And the motor neuron is going to send a signal to the effector, which in this case would be a muscle, to contract and move the hand. So to summarize, we have cells that make up tissues, tissues which make up organs, and organs which make up organ systems. And that's getting more and more complex as we go, and that makes up a whole organism. And those working together can have emergent properties that we wouldn't see if we broke it down into its independent pieces. Signals can be sent around the body via electric or chemical signals. Electric is via neuron, chemical is hormones. Hormones send signals slowly for longer periods of time, while neurons are quick and short. The central nervous system, including the spinal cord and brain, using white and gray matter, receive neuron signals that they have received from sensory organs, sensory receptors, and then they process that info and send out effector signals to react, and those effectors could be muscles or glands. And a reflex arc is an example of this, where we've bypassed the brain. The spinal cord with its interneurons is making an executive decision that is unconscious to quickly react to move your hand, for example, out of the way of a burning flame. All right, that's it for this video. You can see here, actually, this is a neuron. So all of these little axons here are bundled up together, and then they're bundled together again. Sorry, this is a nerve, not a neuron. And all of these little bundles together make up an entire nerve structure. All right, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching, and hope you understood everything.